Hi, welcome to Heroes of Change today, and it's my privilege to have on the call here Pallas, Hupe, Cotter.
Yeah, it's a triple barrel mouthful, I know.
So welcome, Pallas, and thanks so much for your time today.
I'm
And
so happy to be here. Thanks, Chris.
no, you're absolutely welcome. So, Pallas, if I said to you, change your thinking, change your life, what gongs goes off in your head when I say that to you?
If only it were that easy. That's what goes off in my head. Changing your thinking. I mean, one of my main messages is cognitive control. And if we could all just exercise cognitive control, then life would be great.
Mm.
Which means sort of taming the sort of lower drivers in us, the nerves, the fear, the doubt, the bad habits, the things that really keep us from leading extraordinary lives, which is what my message is. And so to rise above those things that can pull us down, it takes really using this part of the brain, and that's hard to do.
Why is it hard, do you think?
Well, because we are so hardwired with all of those other things. Fear is set in our amygdala. It's something that we're hardwired to, that keeps us to surviving. Let me start that again. It's our survival instinct. It is hardwired. And it's very hard to ignore something that is supposed to keep us alive. It's the same with other sort of drives that we have. So all of those things like the drive for recognition, the drive to protect our territory, all of these things are very much part of our emotional reaction to the world. And we can't separate ourselves too far from them because we might actually need these things to come into our life. I think about the situations over in Syria where you have nations that are war torn, and they do need to have those amygdala functioning and functioning well. But for those of us who are privileged to lead lives in the developed world without conflict, in the home especially, then we actually have that ability to take control of how we think. But it takes a lot of repeated effort and very mindful effort to get past that hardwiring. Hopefully that made sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And in the sense of your life, where you've had to change your thinking, Pallas,
Yeah.
can you cite an example there for viewers here where it's more pivotal, dramatic, where you might have engaged the fear and you've confronted it and punched through?
Well, I think there's a very important distinction here. I was raised by parents who didn't mind moving around the world. I lived in 4 countries by the time I was 20, 5 states, went to 7 schools. And these were moves that I didn't ask for, but was sort of given no choice but to do. So I was forced into change for the first 20 years of my life. And I discovered that the more you confront and go through and survive these pivotal moments in your life, it's like building a muscle. The stronger that muscle gets. So after 20, pretty much, is when I decided to start choosing change and choosing these pivotal moments, choosing to challenge myself, because I knew I would just get stronger by doing so. If you react to change by just digging in your heels, and I use this as an example, if you go to your favorite restaurant, say, and you order what you always order every time, and the waiter or the waitress says, sorry, we're out of that tonight, it's a really clear indication of how you cope with change, because sometimes people get really pouty and they cross their arms and then they just, the whole evening is ruined. But if you have a change mindset and if you've chosen to look at it as an opportunity to try something new, then yes, you can grow. You can grow your horizons, you can grow your palate, and grow your choices for the next time you go out to that restaurant. We are living in an environment that changes not just day by day, but sometimes minute by minute. And it is going to be exponentially faster the longer we're around to witness this. And so learning how to handle it is going to be one of those survival instincts. It's going to be part of what makes us survive. So perhaps dealing with change is going to be more a part of our hardwiring as we go, into the future within this century and beyond.
Yeah. So if you think about heroes and role models of change in your life growing up, who did you think, oh, wow, they've really been a bit of a chameleon, they've punched through and transitioned? Is anyone in that space?
I really honestly, I always say this, when I worked in the media and I interviewed famous people, there were lots of wonderful famous people, but the people who really inspired me most were the people I met every day on the street, working within their environment. So, I reported on the streets of Detroit, And there is so much beyond the control of the people who live in Detroit. The city went bankrupt. There's been corruption. There's crime. And yet you'd find one person in the midst of all of this chaos with their home and their plot of land, perfectly manicured, trying to control what they could. And beyond that, actually reaching out and trying to help community members. And they have been inspirations to me. The people who have just dealt with what life has thrown at them, not ideal circumstances, but just who have persevered. Because when I speak about change, I talk about the difference between enduring and persevering. And there's a difference. Enduring is just, like you endure the elements. You get out, you wrap up, you put your head down. But persevering is just, keeping your eye on the goal and on the horizon and seeing how you can turn it into a positive experience.
Do you have any go-tos when you're transitioning yourself to deal with fears or procrastination?
Constant communication with your close friends, your loved ones. Sometimes it's just venting. You're not looking for solutions. Exercise, nutrition, sleep, all of those basics really come in handy, but they're really hard to control when you're going through change. So the other side of that is done is better than perfect. Trying to be perfect is the perfect way to fail. So especially when you're going through these transitions, it's so important not to try to be perfect or to be too hard on yourself if you fall short of those expectations, because you will do unhealthy things.
Yeah.
And yes, meditation is one of those things that I would love to say that I did. But walking is a meditation, and that I do.
Yeah. And when you look at change and resistance to change, Pallas, and the classic procrastinated mindset, can you give an example, perhaps, of yourself in your life where you've maybe resisted change, but you've got through? Can you give a context for us where you made it through to the other side, and what did you do? How do you think in that sort of sense?
Well, yeah, I'll start with at 13 when my father came home and said, well, I've just accepted a job in Saudi Arabia. And the whole family could go except for me because I was too old. The Saudi government didn't want high schoolers in the kingdom, so they paid for you to go to boarding school outside the kingdom. And I dug my heels in, and I said, basically, hell no, I'm not going to go, which is not how I spoke at 13, but I felt very strongly, but I had no choice. So that showed me that even though it felt like I was literally going to die that first week of boarding school, then I made a few friends and I survived. So I think I primed my mind for what could happen. Another juncture came, and that was at the end of high school, and I could have continued with my friends to some American university, but there was another option in England. And my mother suggested it to me, and I just sort of wrote it off without even giving it consideration. And one day, sitting in class, this little light bulb went off in my head and said, why not try? Why not just give it that little chance? And if you don't like it, it doesn't have to be the end of the world. You can always change your plans and change your mind. But I did try. And one step led to the next step, led to the next step. So it's like a switch flipping. And so if this little thought crosses your mind, and we were discussing this before we started today, there's a little niggle, there's something, I really try to tune into that. And I did a TEDx talk, and I called that tuning into your spidey sense. Because if you really tune into that spidey sense, and then you think about the worst possible scenario, if you actually follow this impulse, you find out that it's probably not all bad. If it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world, but you might actually learn something from it or find yourself in a better position for having followed it. So I've resisted, but less and less. And when I find myself resisting, I really examine it. Where is this coming from? A sense of fear, which in my TEDx talk, I remind people is false evidence appearing real in so many cases, not all cases. Or is it just a habit? Is it just a knee-jerk response? Or what could the worst case scenario be? And could I survive that? And once I sort of think through all that, then I can put it in perspective. And then I usually am able to embrace change and move forward with enthusiasm.
What's in front of you in sense of shift, change, transition for you? And how do you feel about that in the next, 1, 2, 3 years?
Yes, well, 1, 2, 3 years, my second son will be up and out of the house. So he finishes in 6 months. It's a real turning point. And it can be a crisis point because this core role that we've played on a day-to-day basis just disappears.
You're a mum of 2. So
Yes.
that's going back to when you first had your babies.
Yes.
Lifestyle transition impact, because you can't think of much of a huger impact on a life, when 2 becomes 3. What was that like for you at the time?
Very confronting.
Mm.
I had never babysat because I went to boarding school at such a young age. I had never changed a diaper, and I had my first son. I was working full time. I went back to work at 6 weeks part time, and then at 8 weeks full time. So I didn't have much time off, and my family, my extended family, was very far away.
Mm.
So it was tremendously challenging. I remember thinking, I don't know how to do this job. And when I went back to work, I thought, well, at the very least, I know how to do this job. And that was anchoring the news and writing behind the scenes. But that was a huge life change,
Mm.
and it was messy.
Mm.
And that's important to also embrace. It's
Mm.
going to be messy. And I wasn't a perfect mother. And then I berated myself for not being perfect. And then I realized, well, that's doing no good. So again, reaching out for help and support from other mothers, whoever I could find near me, um, and being quite upfront about the struggles that I was having, and not trying to hide in a bubble, which is what my message is. My company name is Pop. And I tell people to just, quit hiding in that bubble, but pop that bubble and connect with people, and really be yourself. And I always tell my children, I know I'm making mistakes, and I'm trying not to, but I'm very transparent about that. You're free to point them out, but to a point.
Yeah.
However, I'm doing my best. And so I do try to learn and respond. But when I do make mistakes as a parent, I own them,
Mm.
because I think that's really important. Going back to that idea of respect, I think parents ideally need to respect their children, both as, separate from the parents themselves and not confusing that identity, but also respect that they have their own goals, dreams, passions, strengths, and that should be honored. And we should not impose our expectations on them, but guide them along the way and let them make some choices in their lives as well. It's like they hold little mirrors up to ourselves, and we're pretty surprised at what we see sometimes. It's confronting, but a great opportunity to embrace change.
So just finally here, in sense of one piece of sage advice from your travels in your life, Pallas, for those maybe contemplating change or resisting or procrastinating, but what do you think that would be?
Well, it isn't difficult for me because I live by this motto. Life is short,
Mm.
make it pop, make it extraordinary. We don't have any guarantees that we're going to be here for a long time. And
Mm.
we wait far too long to make changes in our life. We wait for crises to happen. We don't realize that we can choose to change and embrace change at these junctures. And we think, oh, well, there's always tomorrow. And there isn't. There really isn't. We have to learn that the hard way.
Mm-hmm. Hey, fabulous. Lovely to talk to you today, Pallas.
And it's nice to sit down and really get dug in or stuck into a topic that should be central to our day-to-day lives. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Bye for now, Pallas.
Bye.